At 14:38 local time on the Arabian Sea, a routine screening patrol aboard USS Spruant turned lethal the moment an IRGC Peykaap-class fast attack boat broke from a cluster of fishing dhows with 2 Kausar anti-ship missiles on its rails and a single order to close the USS Abraham Lincoln, its twin diesels hammering to full power as 13 tons of fiberglass and Iranian intent ripped out of the cluster at 52 knots. A contact that had been drifting invisible among civilian vessels for over an hour, waiting for exactly this moment, triggering an immediate response from the tactical action officer who hit the command net before the classification was even complete and sent the Mark 45 gun system slewing toward the bearing, a precision fire control machine that calculates where the target will be when the shell arrives, accounts for wind, ship movement, and wave action, and fires with mechanical certainty. But it ran straight into a problem physics created and no engineer had fully solved, because steel ships throw hard, consistent radar returns that bounce back clean and give the fire control computer a solid track to work with, while fiberglass hulls scatter the signal like a broken mirror, bouncing back something barely larger than the ocean surface around it, every wave crest flickering the return like a failing light bulb. And the computer needed 2 stable pings to calculate a valid firing solution, which is like trying to aim a rifle at a squirrel through a picket fence while riding a bicycle. You see it, you lose it, and the gap never lines up long enough to matter, so the gun fired on the last stable solution with a time of flight of 3 seconds. And in 3 seconds, a boat doing 52 knots moves 80 meters from where the computer last placed it. The shell hitting the ocean 40 meters behind the Peykaap, close enough to throw a waterspout over its fantail, and close enough for the helmsman to feel the concussion thump through the hull like a fist hitting a car hood, but not close enough to stop him. And after 12 rounds gone and a 2-minute reload window staring the TAO in the face, the intelligence classification came back, confirming Kausar sea-skimming missiles on the rails with a 20-kilometer range and enough terminal velocity that the carrier's close-in weapon system would get roughly 6 seconds of warning before impact, and the helmsman's orders were to get inside 10 kilometers and fire, which at 52 knots put him 70 seconds from the launch point, so the TAO made the only call that made sense: cease fire, launch the helicopter. And the MH-60R Romeo lifted hard off the deck, nosing low to trade altitude for speed, pushing 150 knots toward the threat at 200 feet above the Whitecaps, while the sensor operator had the AN/AAS-52 thermal targeting system hunting the bearing before they'd crossed the ship's wake. A stabilized camera capable of reading a license plate from a mile out that found the Peykaap immediately as a hot white streak burning against cold blue ocean, the Romeo closing fast, while the helmsman's hand moved toward the firing switch until his radar warning receiver screamed with an airborne laser designation, something painting him that he could not outrun, and the Hellfire came off the rail riding that laser beam the entire way, physically touching the hull it was chasing, which meant that where the Mark 45 had been swinging a sledgehammer through statistical noise and sea clutter, the Hellfire was a needle following a thread. The boat jinked and the missile jinked with it, 49 kilograms of shape charge closing at 475 meters per second, and the boat didn't sink. It stopped existing, one frame on the flyer showing a 52-knot contact closing the carrier, the next showing burning fuel and debris scattered across 200 meters of Arabian Sea, 11 minutes from first radar contact to intercept with 4 calls made in sequence, and every single one of them right. But the first boat had been the probe all along, a deliberate sacrifice designed to test the response, absorb the Hellfires, and map the defensive reaction, while 2 more Peykaps waiting in the Dow cluster broke and sprinted for underground boat pens carved into the limestone cliffs of Keshem Island, facilities that, if reached, would swallow both hulls and have them back on the water by morning with fresh missiles, and everything the first helmsman's run had just taught the IRGC, which is why the E-2D Hawkeye immediately vectored a pair of A-10 Thunderbolts south from their Overwatch orbit above western Iraq, aircraft that had been burning patient holes in the sky for 4 hours on turbofans so thermally cool they were nearly invisible against background infrared clutter. And unlike the fast jets that would have been dry on fuel an hour ago, the Warthogs had been waiting with the endurance that only a slow airplane can afford. So Pelican 31 dropped to 5,000 feet, pulled the throttle back, and followed the lead boat home rather than killing it in open water. watching through his sniper targeting pod as it decelerated near the coast and nosed into a narrow tunnel entrance concealed under camouflage netting at the waterline of a limestone cliff, 8 meters wide, 4 meters tall, a facility CENTCOM had no record of until that exact moment. And having found it, he pressed his attack despite the ALR-69 screaming ATORM-1 air defense battery that had rolled onto the headland above the tunnel. A Russian-built system that goes from detection to missile launch in 8 seconds and fires at Mach 2.8 against an aircraft whose top speed is 4 times slower with no afterburner to run on. So he dropped to 200 feet and threaded the coastline using the cliff faces to break the radar's line of sight, because the Tor needs a continuous track to fire, and every time the terrain interrupted the beam, the 8-second launch clock reset to 0. Visible for 3 seconds, hidden for 5, never giving the battery the window it needed until the GAU-8 Avenger spun up and put 65 rounds of 30mm depleted uranium into the second Peykaap in a single 1-second burst that walked from stern to bow before the helmsman could process the sound. 7 barrels at 3,900 rounds per minute shredding hull, engine, and weapons, rail into a debris cloud settling across the channel like ash, after which a man-portable missile team on the clifftop that had been tracking him for 12 seconds with no radar emissions and nothing on the warning receiver fired a Mathok 2 heat seeker that his missile warning system only caught as a smoke trail climbing at his 2 o'clock, leaving just enough time to break hard right and punch flares burning at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit into the missile's flight path, hotter than the engines and brighter than everything around them, the seeker abandoning the exhaust for the more intense heat source and detonating 400 meters behind the aircraft, while Pelican 30 seconds back and watching the whole sequence rolled immediately toward the clifftop and put 3 guided rockets into the man-pad position before they could reload, then locked a Maverick onto residual heat baked into the limestone around the tunnel mouth and fired, the warhead cracking the overhang along natural fault lines that had held the cliff together for millions of years and needed only the right encouragement. 200 tons of rock cascading across the entrance and sealing the facility under its own mountain. 3 boats destroyed, 1 underground base buried, the entire engagement resolved from first radar contact to sealed tunnel in under 70 minutes, all of it executed by a naval crew that refused to let a fiberglass hull hand the initiative to the enemy, and 2 pilots in an airplane the Air Force had spent a decade trying to retire, flying lower and slower and closer to the threat than anything else in the inventory would have accepted, because the Warthog doesn't win by being fast, it wins by refusing to leave.